Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome to Social Studies. Today we are going to be talking about the 14th President of the United States, Mr. Franklin Pierce. And I'm going to stick him back here while we talk about him. He was a one-term president because just like all the others before him, he refused to deal with the issue that was separating this country, and that issue was slavery. Most historians over the last 150 years pretty much rank him in the bottom as one of the worst presidents this country has ever had. And there's a reason for it. Shortly before he became president, about 2 weeks before he was inaugurated, his 11-year-old son was run over by a train and killed. And he never quite got over it. He also had another son who was 4 years old, many years earlier, who died of typhus. That's the same disease Anne Frank died of. And he had another son who was born, who died shortly after he was born. So this man had 3 sons, and all 3 sons never made it to 12 years of age. So when he became president, most historians believe that it really affected his mental state. And he was quite a sad man. And once he was sworn in as president, tensions between the North and the South over slavery, the tensions really began to get tight. Tension became much worse. And he tried to stay in the middle. And on an issue of slavery, you can't. And he had to pick a side. So he decided to sign this new law called the Kansas-Nebraska Act, because Kansas and Nebraska were not states yet, or they were about to become new states. And the southern states were afraid that these were going to become free states, and the northern states were afraid they were going to become slave states. So Mr. Pierce signed a law called the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed the people of those states to vote. So what happened was you had the southern states send hundreds of people to these states, and you had the northern abolitionists send hundreds of people to these states so they could vote. And it ended up happening is you wound up with these huge battles, fights between pro-slavery and pro-freedom groups. And this whole time period became known as Bleeding Kansas. A lot of people died in these fights. And Mr. Pierce wasn't able to gain control of the situation. His nickname, by the way, was Handsome Frank, because most people at that time in the 1850s believed that he was a very, very handsome man. Kind of like Mr. Gibbons. But he lived for about 10 more years after his presidency. He died of failure of the liver. He became a heavy, heavy drinker. And just died a slow, painful death in New Hampshire. And that is Franklin Pierce, the 14th President of the United States. Another president who kicked the slavery ball down the road.